Welcome to the Scale Tactics Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sells, a former Army Ranger turned government tech executive and now small business founder, passionate about helping small to mid-sized businesses succeed. This podcast is designed to educate leaders on the different operating principles for small to mid-sized businesses. On today's episode, our guest is Karonda Adair. Karonda is the founder of Carvel Digital, an agency that provides marketing automation for mission-driven service-based businesses that want to create a predictable sales pipeline. From her humble beginnings building WordPress websites, Karonda found a passion for marketing and marketing automation. Today, she's a digital marketer and certified automation service provider who helps her clients make sure that no lead slips through the cracks and that every piece of email marketing content you create is used to its fullest potential. She created CRM to Sales to help overwhelmed and overworked teams use ActiveCampaign as the foundation for building a system that helps you save time and increase revenue. When she's not working, she can be found enjoying time at home with her wife, 2 cats, and Vishla puppy, reading Dead Tree books, riding one of her 5 bikes, or enjoying the postcard vistas of the state of Oregon where she resides. Key highlights of our conversation today include: automation is the process of hiring technology to execute your business processes. Note the word hiring. When adding to your tech stack, start by writing out what you need the technology to do, then go find the solutions that work. Better, work with a professional that can help you. The small fee for even just a consultation, or even better, implementation, will definitely save you down the road. Instead of asking your peer network, i.e. Facebook, what you should use or what you should do, ask instead what expert you should talk to. This way you're working with the subject matter expert that will first understand your situation and then recommend a solution that works uniquely for you. Having a centralized repository, such as Airtable, that can tag and organize your content will help codify your voice for others to take it and run. This way, anyone can quickly access snips for social media, other reference, or to send to customers. Finally, when going through your processes, look at triggers and actions. What is the customer triggering and the action you want to take in response? Adding this to your process map can really help you nail your sequence and find gaps, either in steps or content that needs to be built. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a great one. When I first heard Karonda doing research for the show, she definitely blew me away with her knowledge and just awesome personality. So look forward to sharing our conversation with you. And now on to the episode. Hey, Karonda, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So topic for the day, marketing automation. And I think most people, when they think of that, it's, oh, that's just automating my email sequences, right? But really, that's just scratching the surface. So Karonda, in your opinion, how would you define marketing automation and how does that make your business life easier?
I would define marketing automation very simply as the process of hiring technology to execute your business processes. So we talk a lot about marketing automation, but there's lots of things in your business you can automate. And so really it's about looking at those processes and saying, could the robots do this? They never tire, they never quit, And so that's really the simple explanation.
There are definitely multiple facets of automation. There's marketing, there's sales, there's onboarding. What are some of the examples of automations that you've done for your clients as we start diving deeper into this topic?
Yeah. So marketing automation, a lot of it is kind of the basics of what you talked about and what people think about, which is email, right? That's the basis of it. But what I find is a lot of people don't have kind of what we consider to be the foundation or the minimum basics in place. And that to me would be what we call a getting to know you sequence. And so that's like, people come onto your list and you want to make sure there's a 3 or 4 email welcome sequence that really kind of sets the stage, right? It tells them where they are, what it is that you do, maybe how you got started doing it, and more importantly, what you can do for them, why it's important, and how they can hire you. And so that's the first thing. And I think most people are kind of familiar with that, and a lot of people have that in place. And then the second thing, which I think a lot of people don't have, is an actual sales sequence. And the sales sequence is 5 or 6 emails that really explain your offer from different angles and really invite them to, hey, you got on this list because you probably have this problem, right? So here's how we solve this problem. Here's how it works. Here's how you can hire us. And there's an intentional and strategic sales sequence so that you can turn those leads into buyers as quickly as possible.
I think you hit on a great point. It really is starting in those foundations and walking through the journey. And to do that, you have to know your value proposition, what that is, and what your sequence is, as you just said. And I've heard you say before that many folks are struggling to get from that 0 to 1 or that 1 to 2. What are you seeing specifically that they struggle with as they try to get this going?
So there's people struggle on a number of different levels. One, they struggle with the technology, whether that's trying to choose the technology because there's literally hundreds of tools that you could choose from and like just getting overwhelmed by that. Two is maybe you have the technology, but you're not really using it to the fullest. So I usually make an analogy about like you have this DSLR camera with like a 200 millimeter lens and you're just using it around the house to like pick it up and take photos of your cat. It's like there's so much more that you could be doing to get the most out of that tool. And so I talk a lot about, getting away from the mentality of buying technology and into a mentality of hiring technology. And when you think about it like what do you do when you hire? You create a job description, right? And so the first thing to reduce overwhelm about what tool you should use is to back away from the tools entirely and really look at your process and look at what is it that you need this tool to do. And that's really going to reduce the number of tools that you're even looking at in the first place. The other thing people struggle with is just the content creation because, we talk about automation. Well, content is like the blood that runs through the veins of automation. Like, you can automate emails, but what's in that email? Like you need to send the right message to the right person at the right time. And so I think, trying to figure out how to create that customer journey just gets really overwhelming for people on so many different levels.
Yeah, some of that definitely resonates. I know kicking off my own business, there's just so many places you can put your energy and your resources, but you only have a finite number. So it really comes down to that. Yeah, how do you prioritize? What do you tackle? You bring up some things that I'd like to dive into a little bit more. So first, you mentioned hiring the right tool and creating a job description for the technology. But how do you really go about taking that next step and selecting one? Because there's usually a lot of free trials that you can do, but it can be really hard to learn them in depth enough to make sure that it works or it doesn't work for you. How do you go about trying to find something that works and being a good steward of your time?
I mean, the best way is just to get professional help, right? Like as an certified automation service provider, that's literally my job is to help people go through and map out their processes and then help them hire that technology, right? So, if you don't have the budget for that, or if that's not where you're at right now, like there's other things. Like I'm on this podcast. I have my own podcast. I have entire episodes about choosing your technology stack and, entire episodes about your website and what the function of that should be in your business. So you can start there by like following people and, perusing their content, binging their content and seeing like, does it make sense? Does what they're saying make sense in terms of how to choose these tools and what are they using, right? What are professional marketers and people like, this is the thing that makes my heart hurt is when I see people like going into, Facebook groups or LinkedIn or wherever you're hanging out and just sort of asking randomly like, hey, what's the best CRM, right? You have no idea what the expertise level or the point of view of those people. They have no idea about your business and the context in which you're asking. I actually have a podcast episode just about asking better questions, and it was largely sparked by this phenomenon. So really going to a professional, and I actually had someone come and do. I have like a power hour consult, and she's starting a new business, and she said, "You know what? I don't want to even waste time trying to guess about this technology." So we did a strategy session. We looked at everything that she needs to do sort of right away in her business. And then I gave her a prescription of like, here's the technology that you need to hire right now. Here's some things that you might need down the road. And then I threw in like referrals of, you're going to need these other things too. Maybe someone to help you with your website or your social media. Like here's some people I trust. And just investing upfront in that kind of consulting is going to save you so much money on the back end. And I know this because I've had people come to me after trying to figure it out, trying to DIY, trying to hire the wrong, people. And they come to me having wasted, easily $25,000 or more on just hiring people and not getting the outcomes that they want. And so, I really look for people who have the wherewithal to say like, you know what, I'm just going to skip that whole journey where, I waste all that time and money, like trying to save money and just get the help in the first place. So I have a particular episode that does go through like our tech stack and why we choose it. I think it's episode 14 of my podcast, which is Begin As You Mean to Go On. And so that's a great place to start. For us, it's like we've been doing this for so long. Like we kind of have our cast of tools. And just this second, I was thinking about, I was watching like interviews with some actor who was talking about how great it was to work with somebody that she'd already worked with years. I think it was Jennifer Garner, like is doing something new with Victor Garber, who she was on that. I can't remember the name of the series, but she's like, it's so great to you just fall into, like you already know each other. And so for us, it's like we have a suite of tools. We already know them so well. We've been using them and producing results with them so well. And that's why it might seem cavalier where people ask me like, oh, what should you use for this? And I rattle off an answer, but it's because I've seen so many businesses like in your particular situation, and I know what this tool can do. And so I'm able to do that like really quickly. And if I don't know, if I don't think that's the right tool for you, then I will also say that. But really getting wise counsel is probably the best thing and the most economical thing that you can do.
I think that's a great pull out for the show notes. Hey, instead of asking in a Facebook group what you should be using, you should instead be asking who you should be talking to, who is the expert consultant that you can do a discovery call with to get a better understanding. And another thing for the show notes, Kronda mentioned her podcast that will be linked. If you'd like to check it out, highly recommend. When I was doing research for this show, I was listening to a few of her episodes, and as I'm on the treadmill listening to one of them, the first one, I was just like, oh my gosh, she is awesome. So definitely recommend checking her out. But anyways, think you bring up a good point of investing in the consulting, and it doesn't have to be that much time or money. In the grand scheme of things, one call or two calls for, maybe even a couple $100 total can save you in the long run so much bad money and spending money in the wrong direction, as well as just the opportunity cost of your time. But that can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
It is. YouTube University is just very seductive for people sometimes.
Now that we looked at hiring the right tool, want to dig into the second piece that you had talked about, which was content creation. And that's something there are definitely several pieces to include finding your voice. And you actually ran a boot camp to help people do this and create their content. So when it comes to the content, what are the things that you tell people to get started and then build on that momentum?
Yeah, so the core tenets of boot camp were really offer audience messaging. And I see so many of my colleagues talking about the same thing. It just always makes my heart happy because that's really where you start. And in that order, right? You have to have an offer that people actually want. That's really like more than half the battle. A really great offer is going to sell itself when you put it in front of the right people. So that's why that second pillar is your audience. If you have a mismatch between any of those, then you're going to struggle and you're going to have a hard time. And it's really sad because you actually might have a great offer and just be putting it in front of the wrong people. And so really getting those two things in order first, and then looking at how are you talking about this offer to those people? What is your messaging like? I had a colleague of mine who is an attorney just post recently, and she was like, oh, I get it now why it's hard to find an attorney, because she was trying to help a friend find an attorney outside of the state where she practiced. So she's looking at all these terrible websites with all this lawyer speak that like normal people just don't understand. There's no way to contact them. It's like, wow, do you actually want business? Right? So the messaging is really figuring out how to talk to people in a way that's going to resonate with them and draw them to you and make them say like, oh, I need to know more about this person. I need to know more about the offer. And the way that you get that is by putting in the reps. And I know that you have a big, veteran-based audience, and I love that. I called it a content boot camp very specifically for a reason, because I didn't want people to think, oh, this is a course where you're going to come and watch a bunch of videos and then like you're magically going to know everything. It's like I can't teach people marketing. They have to learn it by doing it. And I'm like the coach and the guide and just keeping them on the path. But, imagine if like in the military, it's like, okay, we're going to watch these videos about doing basic training. and then we're going to send you on the front lines. Or somebody saying like, oh, I have no experience in this, but I'm going to make up my own basic training program. Like it's absurd. And yet people try to do this in marketing all the time. And so just having someone who can be like, here's what you need to focus on right now, go and put in the reps. And once people actually start to do that, like it's surprising how quickly they get results, because so many of my boot camp clients had amazing offers and were amazing people with like brilliant values, and they just needed to show up in the right way for their people to be able to find them.
Yeah, you're definitely right. In the military, it was always crawl, walk, run. And yeah, you may start watching a video, but it's all about getting the reps and earning that blood, sweat, and tears to figure it out. So can we go a little tactical on that piece, if you will? And I know that in theory, it's very simple. You have a good offer, know your audience, and then make sure that your message resonates. But how do you start getting after that? I think the offer is probably pretty easy. Hopefully you generally know what it is that you do, but where do you start? How do you start working with your clients in your boot camp to connect them to the customer and the message?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is, when they would come in, we would give them a worksheet to really go through. It's like a deep dive on their offer and ask them so many questions about what is the actual transformation that you're offering to people. And I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs, and women are just classically socialized to devalue ourselves. And so almost all the time I'd be like, okay, we need to raise your pricing because this isn't even sustainable. But in order to be able to do that, you have to actually understand the value that you're giving to people. So an example would be, I had a web developer come through boot camp, which I loved because that's my background. And she was in a phase that I had been in where she thought she was selling websites. And I'm like, no, actually, you're selling a transformation where people are going to be able to show up to a website and they're going to be able to, become clients from interacting with that website or becoming a lead through that website. Like you're selling the experience. And actually, she built membership websites, so that's even better because you're selling the experience of creating this amazing client experience for people's students. And so if you have $1 million business, but you have this janky back end where, people are having tech problems. So I'm like, I had to really make her understand, like, you're not selling a website. You are selling this experience that they want to deliver to their clients, and you need to charge accordingly for that. So that was the first thing, is like, just get that clarity. And then usually I have people pick a platform. So where are you going to show up? Is it going to be on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram? Email is always in there as a baseline because that's, but in order to get people on your email list, you have to show up somewhere where people can know you exist, right? So are you going to do that by, guesting on podcasts like this? Are you going to do it by, I was on an Instagram live earlier with my YouTube strategist. You've got to have some kind of strategy to actually get in front of people and start posting content. And, there would always be this period in the beginning where they're like putting so much pressure on that first post. Like, oh, it's got to be perfect. I would over and over again bring up, when I learned this from my mentor, the first post I did was about the very deep topic of putting your hours on your website. Because I was at the bike shop and I was trying to figure out when they were open. And I'm like, why isn't this on their website? Why do we have to call? And I knew the owner, I'd spent so many thousands of dollars at that shop, and he happened to be there. And I was like, Dave, what the hell are you doing? He's like, oh, we do get a lot of calls about that. I should put that on the website. And so it's like, it doesn't have to be this epic thing, because what you want to do is you want to build a library of content that people can binge. Like, to your point, you're like, oh, you started in on the podcast and you're like, this is great, I want more. And there is more. Like, there's 54 episodes of the podcast that you can just go and binge. But, that starts with a single step. And so it's getting out there. It's just starting to put your ideas out there, see what resonates with people, start conversations with the people who are engaging with your content. And that's really how it starts.
I love that. What is the transformation you're providing, not just the service that you're offering? Because those are two totally different things, and they resonate much differently with your audience.
Yeah. Like, I'm looking out my window right now at a super cold spring Portland rain, and it's like, someone's selling me a jacket. They're not really selling me the jacket. They're selling me the warmth and the dryness.
Yeah, and you bring up another great point. You mentioned females feeling devalued. I think that's something too that I saw coming out of the military is you're taught to be so humble, and a lot of veterans, we devalue ourselves, and that's something that you're having to deprogram when you get into this business world, and heck, I'm still doing it now.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's completely the opposite, where you have to really put yourself forward and say, yep, this is what I'm doing and this is what it costs, and be firm in that. And if you can't do that with a straight face and with like confident energy, people are going to sense that and your sales are going to suffer.
Or you get the customers that you don't want.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think there's any avoiding that first year of like, okay, I'm just going to take everybody. Yeah, rite of passage for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's the rite of passage. Continuing on the content journey, you talked about getting it out there, but then once you start getting it out there, you have what's referred to as pillar content. What is that, and how can I start capitalizing on that?
Pillar content is really, I think of it as like planting your flag. It is a piece of content that, could be so valuable that people would pay for it. Like the kind of content somebody's going to bookmark it. They're going to come back to it over and over again because they're like, that really shifted my thinking about something, or it's a really core foundational process or how to or piece of advice that I need to follow that I need to refer back to again and again. And so especially in the beginning, you're almost better off instead of, we do the social media post to kind of see like what hits, right? What do people engage with? And then when you start to figure out like, oh, this is what people are struggling with. So to give you an example, for a long time, there's two things. When I was very first getting started and I was in the like, okay, I have to take everybody stage, I really got into it with GoDaddy, which is a very popular web host. And it is a terrible company. It's just like, it's popular. They get the Super Bowl ads. Everybody knows about them. Just because everybody knows about something doesn't mean it's good. And so I got to a point where I literally wasted 5 hours on something that like would have taken me 15 minutes on a better host. And I decided like, that is it. I am planting my flag. If you want this as your hosting, then you go work with somebody else. And I wrote a blog post about it. And to this day, I published in 2014. It's 2023. It's still the most trafficked post on my website because so many developers have the same problem and they'll send their clients to it, or people will Google, And so that's an example of pillar content. And then one of the other things that I really put a lot of energy into is so many clients would come to me not actually owning their digital assets. And so, maybe they felt like, oh, I'm not technical, so I'm just going to let my developer like buy my domain and set up the hosting and do all of that. And really what you're doing there is the analogy I like to make is if you are buying a house, you hire a real estate agent and they help you facilitate that transaction. They don't buy the house for you. They don't sign the papers because then they would own your house. And when you're talking about, your domain name and your website hosting, like that is your digital real estate and you need to own it. And so many business owners came to me, having made that mistake. And then I would have to, kind of rescue them and help them like get that stuff back in their name. And so I wrote at least one or more articles about just the importance of owning your digital assets, explaining what it meant to do that, and just trying to help people avoid that mistake. And so that would be an example of some things where it's like they're really in-depth, long, meaty articles to try to explain these foundational concepts to people. And then from that pillar content, you might have other articles that touch on it that you can then refer back to that pillar content, or you can cross-link other articles, and it just helps keep people on your site for longer.
Yeah, everyone knows I've got to have good content. I've got to have these hooks, but don't assume you know what people want. I like how you said leverage social media, low cost to write, to really find out what resonates, find those pain points that everyone's talking about, and then go build your content instead of wasting all this time that you're going to build this immaculate blog post that doesn't resonate, no one cares about.
Nobody cares. Yeah. There's just so many ways to find out what people are actually struggling with. There's just no excuse to not know. I mean, you can go to Facebook groups, you can go to LinkedIn, you can go to Reddit, you can talk to people. I don't know if people still do that, but it's an option. But yeah, there's just, when you find yourself, when I find myself answering the same question over and over again, that's my cue of like, oh, I need to make some content about this.
And with pillar content, that's something that you can parse out and use in a bunch of different forms to save time and be more efficient, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the beauty of, you can kind of decide on a medium that you like. So I've had clients come through, some people really like videos, some like podcasts, some like writing, text-based. So you can decide on your medium and then you can repurpose that in all sorts of ways.
And what are the ways to track that? I know that's one thing you talk about very heavily, and one of your service offerings is tracking your content. So what are the ways to do that, and why is that valuable?
Yeah. So, if you think about if you opened a physical product store, you would have inventory and you would track your inventory because you want to know how much you sold, how much you sold it for, how much is left, when you need to get more, right? And people don't really transfer this over to the digital world, but the same thing applies. If you're writing content or producing videos or podcasts or what have you, then those things become assets. When people ask me, in the DMs or post in Facebook groups and say like, what domain company should I use? Or how do I get started podcasting? Or, whatever those over and over again questions, then you've created that content, hopefully, to answer those questions. And now you want to be able to get to it when you need it. And so what we did is we came up with a tool that's using a software called Airtable. And Airtable is a relational database software. So if you're old enough to remember Microsoft Access or things like that, similar relational database, but it's pretty. And it's deceptive because, on its face, it looks like a spreadsheet, but there's just so many things you can do with it. And so we created this tool that we call the Pot of Gold. And it's where we store all of our content. And so the great thing about that is that not only can we store it there, but we can tag it, we can categorize it, we can store all the links. So, there might be a piece of content that started out as a YouTube video, but now we've made it into a blog post or a podcast or whatever. And we can have all of those links to all of those separate versions of the asset tied back to the original. And so it's just so powerful. And so we sell that we sell the template as something that you can just go to our website and you can grab it. Right now it's like $49. And then there's some video lessons to teach you like how to get started with it, how to personalize it for your business. And it's been such a hit with the people who buy it and use it, because the people who buy it and use it right away tend to be like other marketers or people who were in boot camp, because then they're like, oh, content is important, right? And so it's deceptive. It's really deceptively priced. People think, oh, they buy it and they sit on it for a year, but then when they start using it, they're like, oh my God, this thing changed my life. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like it literally was the start of me being able to grow my team in 2020, because I hired somebody to help me with social media. And when you hire people to help you, especially with your content and with your marketing, you need to have developed your voice first. I have a piece of content called The Dangers of Outsourcing Your Media Too Soon. I grab it often from the Pot of Gold and share it with people, where people in the very beginning think like, oh, this is hard, I'm just going to outsource it. And it's like, no, you have to develop your voice first. You have to have a point of view. You have to have a brand voice. And so I was able to give her this Pot of Gold and say like, here's 8 years of content, and I want this distributed across social media. And here's like a theme for the month. And here's the call to action. Here's what we're selling. And I was literally able in 2020 to go on vacation and come back from camping having made like $15,000 while I was swinging in the hammock, because I said to the team, here's what we're selling while I'm gone. And here's the content. So those are just really, really important and valuable assets when you start to create content that's working for you, and you want to track those, you want to store those, you want to treat them like gold.
And so in execution, what does that look like? I've got all my different collateral. It's in one place. Is it just organized by medium, by topic? And then anyone can go in and take a look. Like, for example, I'm in technical recruiting. If I'm looking for stuff related to leveraging an employee referral program, how does that look?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can literally organize it any way that you want. Like there's a way that I kind of demonstrate in the template, But, for our purposes, we can search for content by stage of business that it's relevant for. Are you, in the beginner phase? Are you in the growth phase? Are you in the scaling phase? We can leverage content by mindset. Do you have a problem where you're struggling to raise your prices? We categorize by all sorts of things. And so it's really, it's individual to your business, what's going to be important to you. So I have a dog trainer client. So they might categorize their content based on like age of the dog or the behavior issue that they're talking about, or, all sorts of things. So it's really great and flexible, and you can really individualize it to the things that you want to track. And then you can just straight up put keywords in as well. And so you can go search for things. So, and the great thing about Airtable is that once you have it in there, this is where Airtable just outstrips Google Sheets by a mile, is you have all this content in there, and now you can create different views where you can see different things. So we have views where I'm like, oh, I just want to see all of our blog posts that are on our website, or I just want to see all of our YouTube videos, or I just want to see all of the podcast episodes. So instead of searching every time, I literally just go click that view, and it just shows me podcast. Here's the link, here's the episode title. And you can create as many of those as you want, and different people on the team can have different views. And it's so flexible and so powerful.
Yeah. As we've been talking, to get into marketing automation, you've got to set the foundation. And this is the same with growing your business. When you're growing your team and finding stuff that works, if you can't get stuff off your plate, no matter how hard you try, if there's not a way to train that person so they can have your voice and be able to share your voice, whether that's your personal tone, your personal brand, or that of the business. Like, for example, my last tech company, we had a very specific brand voice that was part of our entire marketing. And sharing that with our team, figuring out how we communicate that to a new team member so they can carry on the torch and be on brand, be on message, that was critical. And just having things organized helps, because if it's all over the place, it can take forever to go there. I think we've all spent forever trying to find, where was that post again?
Combing through Google Drive.
I did like
Dropbox.
6 months ago, and trying to scroll through content on LinkedIn or something. I think something we haven't talked about is it's also an opportunity for you to not have to start from zero and look at new ideas, because you have a repository that you can use for inspiration, right?
Exactly. There's a whole table in there that's just for brainstorming. And there's a part of our training videos that walks people through a 10 by 10 process that I learned from one of my mentors. And it's basically just figuring out like what are 10 sort of main topics that you want to be known for, or that you want, you think your audience needs to know about. And then what are 10 subtopics underneath those main topics. And, if you're doing the math, that's 100 ideas that you probably couldn't even produce in a year, but you never have to sit down to the blank page and say like, oh, what am I going to produce today? That's something when I was doing web development and doing like content consulting with people, I took a lot of people through that process. And at the beginning, they think like, there's no way we're going to come up with 100 ideas. And we did it every time, and it usually doesn't take more than a couple hours. And then you've got that bank of ideas, and you're set. You just go pull one out of the bucket, and you're good to go.
Okay, so pivoting a little bit, we've talked about having good content, started looking at your voice, but really marketing and sales is about systems, right? And I know you have 6 that you like to touch on that every business really needs to do marketing and sales effectively. What are those 6 things?
Yeah, so I need to credit my marketing mentor, the great Chris L. Davis of Automation Bridge, and he was the lead of education at ActiveCampaign for 3 years, and he worked at Lead Pages, both marketing companies that every marketer knows. So these are his 6 significant systems. It starts with traffic. How do you get traffic and more eyeballs on your stuff, and getting people to your website and to your socials, and really getting those people to know you exist? So that's the first thing. The second thing is capturing those leads. So, people are just coming to your website. The majority of people who come to your website are going to leave, and they're not going to come back. So we want to try to capture their information, get their email address, maybe their phone number, so that we can continue that conversation. Because if they were interested enough to come and check out your website, if they really have that problem, then they're probably going to want to, remember that you exist, right? So we capture their information, get them on your email list. Third thing is how are you going to present your offer? One of the gold nuggets that I like to share is people really sleep on the thank you page. And people opt into your list, and I see so many people just have a little pop-up that says, thanks for joining, and you're really missing an opportunity, because when you get people in the mode of saying yes to you, you want to keep that train going. And one really easy way to do that is to make sure you have a thank you page for every single opt-in, and to put the next step on that thank you page. If they came to you and they opted in because they want to solve a problem, well, by golly, give them a chance to book the sales call right there. If you don't have a thank you page now go get one up in the next week or so and see what that does, for your bookings or your sales. So capturing is very important. After you capture, then the next thing is, how are you going to present the offer? And that's where the thank you page comes in. That's where those welcome emails and that sales sequence comes in, is you want to present somebody with the opportunity to actually get help solving that problem. And then once you get into some kind of sales event, then it's like, you got to close the deal. So how are you closing that deal? How do people actually give you money? Do you have a payment system set up like ThriveCart? Is it a sales call? Is it a proposal? What is that actual process of like closing the deal and getting the money so you can get started delivering? And that leads to the next system, which is delivery. How are you actually getting people the thing that they paid for? And the higher ticket that you sell, the more expensive your offer, the more important it is to get this right and have a really good first impression. And so if you're a service provider, they're not going to get the service like the instant they pay, but they can sure get a confirmation, and they can sure get a series of emails to tell them like what to expect and what the process is. So that's the fifth one. And then the sixth one really goes throughout all the other systems, and that's follow up. So people are going to fall off at each of these steps. They're going to have your booking page open, and then something's going to happen to distract them. They're going to go to another tab, or their kid's going to cry, or their puppy's going to need to be let out. And how do you follow up with them to keep them moving through that system straight through until them becoming a client? And so those are what Chris calls the 6 significant systems. And when we audit people's systems, that's what we do, is we go through those systems and we see how are those things playing out in your business right now, and what's working well and what could be shored up a little bit.
Because those processes, that's what you're using to automate, right? Like you're looking at each piece,
Exactly.
What can you systemize, and then what can you audit? So I think there's a good segue into customer journey, because that's really too what you're looking at. The touch point, how do you take into account the customer journey as part of your audit, and what do you start looking at in automation?
Yeah, well, I think that phrase, we're trying to be a little more specific when we talk about that, because there's actually the lead to customer journey, which is what I just detailed, right? Those are the systems that you're getting people through, is how do we get this person from a lead who came into our world to becoming a client who's now in our business. And so those systems are really how we map out that journey. And, it's specific based on your business. So if you're a service business, you might be doing sales calls. If you're a product business, you might be trying to get people to that cart page. So that's the lead to customer journey. But then there's actually the customer journey. Like, okay, now you have a customer, now what, right? So how are you going to deliver that? And then how are you going to keep serving that person? Because that's really where the money is made in business, is lifetime customer value, and allowing people to continue to pay you, or going back to them and letting them come back for, whatever the next tier of service is. And so those are 2 different things, and they're both really important.
And when you work with clients, the audit is one of the early steps, I imagine, right?
It's definitely the first step. Yeah, we are doing we're doing a strategy session. We're doing an audit, and it's a bunch of me saying, and then what happens? It's funny because it seems so simple when you do it. It's like, well, we're just going through your system, but it's one of those things, I don't know, maybe it's like therapy, where it's like, it's just really hard to do on yourself. You just need that outside person to be asking those questions and to be bringing that outside perspective, because I can just immediately see things that as soon as I point them out, the business owner is like, oh yeah, of course. Like, to give an example, I was doing a marketing intensive where we were going through this process, and literally they had a contact form with a drop down of like, what are you interested in? And so there were 6 different things, and I was literally going through like, what's this offer? What's this offer? What's this offer? We got to number 4, and she was like, oh yeah, that's like our highest ticket thing. It's like our most important thing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm looking at the form submissions here, and you've got like 4, submissions from, 3 or 4 months ago. What happened with those people? Did they get followed up with? And she's like, no. That was easily $50,000 or more to that business, just from lack of having a single automation that says, confirmed, or sending them to a page to book a sales call, or sending a notification to the team to be like, hey, we got a hot lead for our biggest product. Let's follow up. And so those are the simple things that we find really easily as we go through the process that are just extremely valuable to the business owner, because now you see those cracks. Now you can plug them.
So is that just like whiteboarding from first touch, looking at each piece of collateral and then moving across the journey? Is that how it goes?
Yeah. And we don't do it all necessarily like as we're talking, but I'm taking notes. We're recording the call. We've got the transcript of the call. So usually I'll let Otter do the, I'll let Otter do its thing and do the transcript and just do some highlights. But usually I'm focused on like just really listening for opportunities and listening to where, we need to dig a little deeper and double click on something and piece out what's happening. And then we go back and we listen to the recording. My CTO listens to the recording and pulls it out and like maps it out. And you mentioned Miro, which is a tool we used to use. We like to use Whimsical now. And then we also use Airtable. We have an entire database that we call the Automation Hub, and it's dedicated to documenting everything about your automation, from what are the important pages that we're sending people to, what are the thank you pages, what are the tags that we're going to use inside your CRM, what are the custom fields, how many lists are you going to have, what segments of people do we need to group together for you to be able to message. We're documenting all of that in Airtable, and then we're visually documenting like the journey using Whimsical.
So now as you're moving closer to the actual automation, you've got every piece in the process written down, what collateral goes with it. Maybe if you're missing a step, you found out what you need to add. Then what happens next on the journey to automation?
Once we do the process mapping, then we're gonna talk about what technology are we gonna hire to execute these processes. So that would be the next thing, is to actually map that out. And it's usually a pretty quick process for us, unless we have like some really unusual case, but we generally know what tools we're going to use for things. So then we'll get those up and running, if there's new things that people need to sign up for. So we'll get those in place, and then, we'll go about building the system. And really, one thing that can help if you're kind of trying to conceptualize this and map it out on your own, just to start with, is to think about actions and triggers. So people are taking actions. So if we go back to my shoe buying analogy, people are taking the action of, I'm in the shoe store and I pick up a pair of shoes. That's the action, or the trigger. That's the trigger. And the action is a salesperson's going to come over and ask if you want to try that on, and they're going to go get your size, right? So you want to think about digitally that same thing. What are the triggers, the important triggers that people could do where you're like, ooh, I want to know about that so that we can follow up on it. So typically that is, they're binging your content. They're going to a really important page a number of times. You can tag people as being interested in certain topics based on which blog posts they're going to on your website. So you can send an email, hey, this is our new blog post about, such and such topic. And people click on that, and you can tag them as like, oh, they're interested in this. So the next time you have some offer or some sale related to that thing, you make sure that those people are going to get that. So it's a whole thing.
And I imagine you have to prioritize that, right? Because that's a lot of things to automate and systematize. And so is that part of the process, prioritize the automation and what we roll out?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that what we'll do is, when I have sales calls with people, is one thing I'm doing is trying to evaluate which area of automation are we going to focus on for the first 90 days? Because you're right, we can't do everything at once. And so we're going to look at, are we going to do a marketing automation project, which is usually setting up that core foundational, like we're going to make sure you have a strategic welcome sequence and a sales sequence. We're going to figure out what all your tags and your custom fields and everything. We're going to clean up, your CRM if you've got one and it's a little messy. Like that could be a great first marketing project that we do in the first 90 days. Or are we going to do a sales automation project where it's like, hey, you're doing these sales, but you're falling down on the follow-up and you're losing sales because those people forget about you and somebody else swoops in and gets that sale, or they spend that money somewhere else. So are we going to do a sales automation project where we're really documenting your sales process and making sure that it's really smooth for people. Like maybe you're getting on the phone with a bunch of people who are not actually qualified for your offer. So we're going to put an application process in place so that you can say, hey, we're only going to talk to the people who are actually qualified for this offer. So that would be like a sales project. Or we're going to do an onboarding project where it's like, well, your biggest pain point is you actually are kind of sabotaging yourselves because you're worried about, oh, I'm going to get this client and that's going to result in a bunch of manual work for me or my team. And I'm not sure that we're providing the best onboarding experience. So then we might look at, okay, let's look at your onboarding process and see and make sure that we can get that smooth so people can buy at noon or 3 a.m. and they're going to get the same experience. So we look at one of those things, what's going to give the biggest lift to the client, and we will start with a 90-day project focused on that thing.
Yeah, it's definitely not just about the sale. It's about the delivery too, especially when someone's buying a high ticket item. Like, I worked with a provider for a service and they said, hey, it's going to be about 2 weeks before you give you the deliverable. And it was like crickets during those 2 weeks. And you're like, okay, is it still happening? Are we still on track?
Is it happening? What's going on? Right.
So even those little touch points, they really do. And it is critical in the process. They really do help. So talking about automation, and people always think that it's impersonal, but there is a way to personalize it, right? It can serve as triggers. So what are some of the ways that you can make it just a little more human?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, that the reason that we collect all this data about people and we're tagging them and we're storing all these things in custom fields is so that we can be more personal and more relevant. So one example of that, I talked about my dog trainer client earlier. So what we did was we call it the controller. And a lot of these principles I learned from two really brilliant email marketers called Rob and Kennedy, and they have a Email Marketing Heroes is their company. And so I learned this from them. We build a controller and we put people in, and think of it as like a marble falling down into the chute and like going, a different way depending. So for my dog training client, we would ask them about like, what's your dog's age, right? Is it a puppy? Is it a teenager? Is it a mature dog? And so if they're a puppy, then we're going to maybe talk to them about private clients, and they're going to go into that sales sequence of like, hey, we can help you with socialization. We can do all these things, versus if they have a teenager, that thing is like full of hormones and like energy. And we're going to talk to them about, hey, do you want us to take your dog on off leash adventures so that, you come home from work and your dog is tired and satisfied. Right. So that's where the personalization comes in, is actually using the data you collect to give that personalized messaging about things that are going to be relevant to that person.
There's also ways you can use it to trigger a person-to-person conversation too, right? To flag something for engagement.
Oh, absolutely. I think we talked about that a little bit about, if you're going to trigger somebody is binging your content or they're visiting your sales page a bunch of times, you don't have to necessarily put them into an automated sequence. The action could be, you're going to notify somebody on the team and they're going to pick up the phone and call that person. Yeah, that's a way to personalize as well. It's using the automation and the software tools to really surface who is really engaging with your stuff so that you can then decide, like, how do you want to personally react to that? Maybe you want to send them a video message or a voice note or, what have you. And another thing, this is going into advanced stuff, but another way to personalize is you can really do a lot with website personalization for people who are on your email list. So the tools that we use for our website, we're able to, we do this with our workshops and our webinars, for instance. I talked about the importance of the thank you page or like a confirmation page. And so in the past, I'd have like a million sort of different pages based on like what people opted in for, what they purchased. And now we just have one page that we use for like 3 or 4 different things, because based on the URL, we can actually change the content that's on that page. If you just opted in and now we know your name, we can put your name on the thank you page and say, hey, Bill, thanks for opting in, and here's your next step. And so I do that a lot when we were doing sort of high ticket done for you services. The booking page for that, I didn't really give it out publicly, but if people were interested, I would actually build in the URL and it would say, hey, Lena, are you ready to work hard once and automate your business? And here's the application form. And so just like that's the most beautiful thing for people to see is their own name. So there's a lot you can do with personalization, even on your web pages.
One of the questions I always like to ask is, as a company is going to be looking at different vendors to outsource marketing and marketing automation, what are some of the good questions they should be asking in the initial sales call as they're assessing who is the right fit to come on board and give them some help?
I actually think if you wait until the sales call, you're kind of late. Right? I mean, we've been talking about content and content marketing for an hour. Like, if someone's on a sales call with me, I expect that they've gone and they've listened to my podcast. They've gone and watched some of my YouTube videos. They've gone, like, you need to go binge this person's content. And if they don't have the content to binge, then that's a non-starter for me. Like, if you're talking about, a marketing professional. So you should actually be pretty confident that you vibe with this person. It's a values match. Like, they should have strong opinions about things. Like, you can go find out my opinions about GoDaddy, about all-in-one software, about, like lots of things. And you should really know all that by the time you come to the sales call. So like, everybody's time is valuable. Like, I don't want to be doing that stuff on the sales call. The sales call is really to talk about like your specific problem, and for me to understand like the nuances of that problem and to explain to you how we're going to solve that problem. That's what the sales call is for. We're not doing like, there's a vibe check, obviously, of like talking in person to people, but like, I don't want to be explaining to you like, oh, here's why we use Airtable or here's why we use ActiveCampaign, because that content is all out there.
Very true, especially in this industry. This is one you should be able to do your homework. There should be a lot of content, especially if you're hiring somebody to do marketing or automation. They don't have any campaign going, probably a non-starter. And you get to learn stuff along the way.
Yeah, like if you didn't learn anything from their content, that's also like, I want people tell me all the time, like, oh, this blew my mind or had this aha moment. Like, that's another good thing that your content should be doing, is like giving people the beliefs and the tools that they need to be able to work with you successfully.
Karonda, so closing out, where is a great place that people can go find you? And if they want to learn more about marketing automation, catch some of your content.
The best place to go is going to be carveldigital.com. That's Karvel, like Marvel with a K, digital.com. And so you can get everywhere else from there. You can go get into the podcast, get into the YouTube channel. You can get on our email list and see what our email marketing engine looks and feels like to you. I hang out mostly on Instagram and Facebook, but I'm trying to be more on LinkedIn too. So you can connect with us in all of those places.
Well, Karonda, thanks for coming on today. Appreciate your insights, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. This was super fun.
Thanks for joining me with my conversation with Karonda Adair as we talked marketing and automation. There's definitely so much that is ripe for automation in your business, whether it's marketing, the sales sequence, or just basic business processes, hiring technology, building that job description, and really finding what works best for you in an efficient manner without having to do 5 trials and waste a lot of time can be a significant driver of success for your organization. Our next episode will feature Janelle Giambrone from M&T Bank as we talk banking and finance. Until next time, happy scaling.